The letter arrived on a Tuesday, crisp and official, sealed with the HOA's embossed logo. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of war, accusing our yard of being an eyesore that devalued the community. My heart pounded as I read the words, picturing the smug face of our neighbor, Margaret Hensley, who'd been eyeing our wildflower garden with disdain for months. I'm Emily Carter, 38, a graphic designer who traded city life for this quiet suburb with my husband, David, and our 2 kids. Our home wasn't perfect. Our lawn was more meadow than manicured, with daisies and clovers spilling over. But it was ours, a canvas of chaos we loved. Margaret and her husband, Richard, lived next door in their pristine, cookie-cutter house, their lawn a sterile green carpet. They were the kind of people who measured grass blades with a ruler. For months, they dropped passive-aggressive hints about our unkempt yard, but reporting us to the HOA was a new low. David, 41, a high school history teacher with a calm demeanor, read the letter over my shoulder. "They've gone too far," he said, his voice steady but edged with anger. "We're not ripping out our garden." Our kids, Mia, 10, and Lucas, 7, overheard and chimed in, indignant. "Why do they hate our flowers?" Mia asked, her brown eyes wide. I didn't have an answer, but I felt a fire ignite in my chest. This wasn't just about a lawn. It was about control, about Margaret's need to dictate how we lived. That night, we sat at the kitchen table, the letter between us like a battle map. "We could fight this," I said, appeal to the HOA board. But David's eyes gleamed with something else. "Or," he said, leaning forward, "we could think bigger." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. He grinned, the kind of grin that had made me fall for him 15 years ago. What if we turned the tables on them? The idea was absurd, reckless even, but it planted a seed. Margaret and Richard thought they could bully us into submission, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I'd grown up in a family that fought for every scrap, and David had a stubborn streak that rivaled mine. We weren't just going to defend our yard. We were going to make them regret ever picking this fight. The next morning, I dug into the HOA rules, searching for loopholes. The regulations were strict: grass height, approved plants, even fence colors, but nothing explicitly banned wildflowers. The complaint was subjective, fueled by Margaret's personal vendetta. I called a friend, Sarah, who worked in real estate, and asked about the Hensley's property. "Just curious," I said, keeping my tone light. Sarah laughed. "Curious, huh? Their house has been on the market quietly for weeks. Financial trouble, I hear." My pulse quickened. David and I had savings, a nest egg we'd been building for a rainy day. The Hensley's house was bigger than ours, but if they were desperate to sell, we might have leverage. That evening, David and I crunched numbers, our excitement growing. "If we bought their house," David whispered, "we'd control their precious lawn." It was a wild plan, but the thought of turning their weapon against them felt like poetic justice. We contacted Sarah, who arranged a discreet meeting with the Hensley's realtor. We didn't want them knowing it was us, not yet. The realtor confirmed their situation. Richard's business was failing, and they needed to downsize fast. Their asking price was reasonable, almost too good to be true. I felt a pang of guilt, almost. Then I remembered Margaret's smug smile as she'd handed me a friendly note about our yard months ago, and the guilt evaporated. By Friday, we'd made an offer through a shell company Sarah set up, keeping our names out of it. The Hensleys accepted without hesitation, desperate for the cash. As we signed the papers, I imagined Margaret's face when she realized who her new landlords would be. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclaiming our freedom, our right to live as we chose. But as we moved forward, a nagging question lingered. How far were we willing to go to win this war? The closing process was a blur of paperwork and anticipation. By the following week, we owned the Hensley's house, though they didn't know it yet. The realtor had kept our identities hidden, and the shell company gave us cover. Every time I passed their perfect lawn, I felt a thrill of secrecy, like a chess player hiding a checkmate move. Margaret continued her campaign against us, oblivious to our coup. She left another note in our mailbox, this one sharper. "Your yard is a disgrace. The HOA hearing is next week. Fix it or face fines." I crumpled the paper, my blood boiling. David caught my eye and winked. Let her dig her own grave, he said. We decided to attend the HOA hearing, not to defend our yard, but to gauge how far Margaret would push. The hearing was held in the community center, a sterile room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. Margaret and Richard sat up front, her posture rigid, his face tired. She presented photos of our yard, pointing out every weed like a prosecutor at a trial. This is about standards, she declared, her voice dripping with superiority. The board, a group of retirees with too much time, nodded gravely. I stood to speak, keeping my tone calm. Our garden is intentional, eco-friendly, and compliant with HOA rules. I cited the bylaws I'd memorized. The board hesitated, but Margaret's influence was clear. They leaned her way. Afterward, she cornered me outside. You think you're clever, Emily, but you're embarrassing yourself, she hissed. Her eyes gleamed with triumph, unaware she was standing on borrowed ground. I smiled tightly. We'll see, Margaret. That night, David and I finalized our plan. We'd serve the Hensleys an eviction notice as their new landlords, citing their lease's termination clause. It was legal, ruthless, and perfectly timed. We hired a lawyer, Karen, who specialized in property disputes. She drafted the notice with precision, ensuring every detail was airtight. You're playing with fire, she warned, but her grin showed she admired our audacity. The notice gave the Hensleys 30 days to vacate. We planned to deliver it in person, wanting to see their faces when the truth hit. The day arrived, a crisp Saturday morning. David and I walked to their front door, eviction notice in hand. My heart raced, not from fear, but from the weight of what we were about to do. This wasn't just about a yard anymore. It was about power, about showing them they couldn't control us. I knocked, and Margaret answered, her face souring at the sight of us. What do you want? She snapped. I handed her the envelope, my voice steady. This is for you and Richard. She opened it, her eyes scanning the page. Her face paled, then flushed red. What is this? She stammered. Richard appeared behind her, reading over her shoulder. You bought our house? He whispered, disbelief cracking his voice. I nodded. You're tenants now, and your lease is terminated. You have 30 days. Margaret's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, she looked small, vulnerable. Richard's hands shook as he clutched the paper. I felt a flicker of pity, but it was drowned by the memory of their relentless attacks. You should have left our yard alone, David said quietly. We turned and walked away, their stunned silence echoing behind us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The victory felt hollow, tinged with questions. Had we gone too far? Were we becoming the bullies now? David sensed my unease and squeezed my hand. We're protecting our family, he said. But as I stared at the ceiling, I wondered if protecting our family meant destroying theirs. The neighborhood buzzed with whispers after the eviction notice. Word spread fast. Margaret and Richard were moving out, and the Carters were behind it. Some neighbors shot us wary glances. Others, like our friend Tom across the street, gave us sly thumbs-ups. Didn't think you had it in you, he said, chuckling. I forced a smile, but the weight of our actions pressed heavier each day. Margaret didn't take it quietly. The next morning, her car was parked crookedly in our driveway, blocking our garage. She stormed up to our porch, banging on the door. You think you can ruin us? She shouted as I opened it. Her face was blotchy, her eyes wild. This is our home. I stood firm, though my stomach churned. You made it a war, Margaret. We just finished it. She glared, then spun away, leaving a trail of curses. David and I spent hours debating our next steps. The Hensleys had 28 days left, and we knew they'd fight. Karen, our lawyer, warned us they might try to contest the eviction, though our paperwork was ironclad. They're desperate, she said. Desperate people do stupid things. Her words echoed as we watched Richard load boxes into a U-Haul, his movements slow, defeated. Margaret, meanwhile, was nowhere in sight. Mia and Lucas sensed the tension. Are we bad guys now? Lucas asked one night, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. I knelt beside him, my heart aching. No, buddy. We're standing up for what's ours. But his question lingered, a splinter in my conscience. Were we teaching our kids to fight fire with fire, or to be ruthless? A week later, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Margaret had rallied, filing a counter-complaint, claiming our purchase was predatory and our eviction retaliatory. The board, still under her sway, seemed eager to side with her. David and I prepared meticulously, bringing property records, the eviction notice, and a timeline of their harassment. At the meeting, Margaret spoke first, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "They're trying to destroy us," she said, tears in her eyes. The room murmured sympathetically. I stood, my voice clear. "This isn't about destruction. It's about fairness. The Hensleys targeted our family for months, trying to control how we live. We bought their house legally, and we're within our rights to end their tenancy." I laid out the facts, watching the board's expressions shift. David added, "Their complaint to the HOA started this. They don't get to play victims now." The room fell silent. The board dismissed the counter-complaint, but the victory felt Pyrrhic. Margaret's tears were real, even if her motives weren't. Back home, we found a note taped to our door. "You'll regret this." No signature, but it was Margaret's handwriting. David called the police to document it, just in case. As we sat in our living room, the wildflower garden glowing under the moonlight outside, I felt a mix of triumph and dread. We'd won another round, but the war wasn't over. What would Margaret do next? And what were we becoming in this fight? The note on our door marked a turning point. Margaret's threats weren't just words anymore. They carried a menace that kept me up at night. David installed security cameras, and we started locking our gates, something we'd never done in this quiet suburb. The kids noticed, their questions sharper now. "Why are they so mad?" Mia asked. I struggled to explain without poisoning their view of the world. Margaret and Richard had 20 days left. Their house, our house now, was half empty, boxes stacked on their porch. Richard avoided eye contact when we passed, but Margaret's glares were venomous. Then, one morning, our wildflower garden was vandalized. Daisies were uprooted, clover trampled. A can of weed killer lay discarded nearby. Lucas cried when he saw it, and my anger flared. "This is low, even for her," I muttered to David. We checked the cameras, but the footage was grainy, someone in a hoodie, unidentifiable, at 2 a.m. We reported it to the police, who took a statement but warned proof was thin. "Could be kids," the officer said. I knew better. David and I agreed. We couldn't let this slide. We hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Mike, to dig into the Hensleys. "If they're playing dirty, we need to know," David said. Mike's report came fast. Richard's business was underwater, and Margaret had been emailing HOA members, trying to sway them against us. No hard evidence of the vandalism, but her fingerprints were all over it. We decided to confront her, not with accusations, but with pressure. Karen suggested a letter, reminding them of the eviction timeline and the consequences of property damage. We hand-delivered it, watching Margaret's face twist as she read. "You can't prove anything," she spat. I smiled coldly. "We don't need to. You're out in 18 days. Richard stood behind her, silent, his eyes hollow. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The neighborhood was splitting. Some supported us, tired of Margaret's HOA tyranny. Others saw us as aggressors. At a block party, I overheard whispers. The Carters went too far. I sipped my lemonade, pretending not to care, but it stung. David squeezed my hand. "We're not here to win a popularity contest," he said. Still, the isolation gnawed at me. Were we fighting for our principles, or just feeding a grudge? Then came a curveball. Sarah, our realtor friend, called with news. The Hensleys were trying to sell their furniture and appliances before moving, likely to scrape together cash. "They're desperate," she said. An idea sparked. What if we bought their remaining assets, leaving them with nothing but their clothes? It was cruel, but so was their campaign against us. David hesitated. "This feels like kicking them when they're down," he said. I nodded, but the fire in me burned brighter. They kicked us first. We made an offer through Sarah, lowball but tempting. The Hensleys took it, too broke to negotiate. As we loaded their dining table into a truck, Margaret watched from her window, her face a mask of fury. I waved, a small, petty gesture, but it felt good. Yet, as we drove away, I wondered, when does justice become vengeance? The line was blurring, and I wasn't sure where we stood anymore. With 10 days left, The Hensleys' house looked like a shell. Bare walls, empty rooms, their once perfect life stripped down to cardboard boxes. I should have felt victorious, but a knot of unease tightened in my chest. David felt it too. "We've made our point," he said one night, staring at the ceiling. "Maybe we should ease up." I wanted to agree, but Margaret's latest stunt, spreading rumors we'd bribed the HOA, kept my resolve ironclad. The rumors reached us through Tom, who'd overheard Margaret at the grocery store, telling anyone who'd listen we'd bought our way out of the yard complaint. It was a lie, but it stuck, turning more neighbors against us. At school pickup, I felt eyes on me, judgmental and cold. Mia came home crying after a friend repeated Margaret's lies. That was the last straw. "No mercy," I told David. He nodded, though his eyes were troubled. We decided to double down. Karen suggested we inspect the Hensleys' house for lease violations to speed up their exit. It was a technicality, but legal. We walked through their home, noting every scratch, every scuff. Margaret followed us, her voice shrill. "You're monsters," she said. I ignored her, but her words echoed Lucas's question. "Are we bad guys now?" The inspection gave us grounds to shorten their notice to 7 days. We served the new notice, and Richard broke down, begging us to reconsider. "We have nowhere to go," he said, his voice cracking. Margaret stood behind him, silent for once, her eyes red. I felt a pang of guilt, but I thought of our ruined garden, our kids' tears. "You made this bed," I said. "Lie in it." The final days were tense. Margaret stopped fighting openly, but her silence was unsettling. Richard moved like a ghost, loading their last belongings. The neighborhood watched, some with pity, others with quiet approval. Tom brought us a bottle of wine, saying, "You showed him." But the victory tasted bitter. We'd won, but at what cost? On the last day, we stood on their porch, our porch now, as the Hensleys loaded their car. Margaret's eyes met mine, not with anger, but with something worse, resignation. "You got what you wanted," she said softly. I didn't respond. As they drove away, I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. David took my hand. "It's over," he said. But was it? The house was ours, but so was the weight of what we'd done. The Hensleys were gone, their house empty, but the silence felt heavier than their presence. Our wildflower garden bloomed again, replanted with the kids' help, but the joy of it was muted. Neighbors avoided us, their whispers louder now. "Ruthless," I heard one say at the mailbox. I wanted to scream that they didn't know the whole story, but what was the point? We'd won the battle, but the war had left scars. David and I decided to rent out the Hensleys' house, not live in it. The idea of moving into their space felt wrong, like wearing someone else's skin. We listed it through Sarah, and within days, a young couple, the Parkers, signed a lease. They were kind, unassuming, and loved our wildflower garden. "It's beautiful," Lisa Parker said, smiling. Her words warmed me, a small balm for the guilt that lingered. But Margaret's shadow lingered too. A week after they left, a letter arrived, not from the HOA, but from her. Handwritten, it was a single page, her words sharp and raw. "You think you've won, but you've lost more than we have. You're not who you think you are." I read it twice, my hands trembling. David tossed it in the trash. "She's just bitter," he said. But her words cut deep, mirroring my own doubts. I started noticing changes in us. David was quieter, his usual humor dulled. Mia stopped inviting friends over, embarrassed by the gossip. Lucas clung to us more, sensing the shift. One night, I found an old photo of our garden's first planting, the four of us laughing, dirt on our hands. I cried, realizing how far we'd strayed from that joy. Had we fought for our family, or had we let vengeance consume us? I tracked down Richard's new address through Mike, the investigator. They'd moved to a small apartment 20 miles away. Against David's wishes, I drove there, needing closure. Their building was run down, a far cry from their old home. Richard answered the door, looking older, thinner. "Emily," he said, surprised. I apologized, not for the eviction, but for how it ended. "We didn't want it to go this far," I said. He nodded, weary. Neither did we. Margaret wasn't there, and I didn't ask to see her. As I drove home, I felt lighter, but not absolved. The fight had changed us, and I wasn't sure we could go back. That night, I told David about the visit. He was quiet, then said, "Maybe it's time to let go." We agreed to donate part of the rental income to a community garden project, a small step toward healing. Months passed, and the neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. The Parkers tended their new home with care, their kids playing in our garden with Mia and Lucas. The HOA eased up, perhaps chastened by the drama. Our wildflowers thrived, a quiet rebellion against conformity. But the scars of our fight lingered, in the cautious glances of neighbors, in the way David and I sometimes avoided each other's eyes. I started volunteering at the community garden, pouring my energy into something bigger than our feud. It felt good to create, to nurture, to rebuild. Mia and Lucas joined me, their laughter a reminder of why we'd fought in the first place. One day, as we planted sunflowers, Mia asked, "Are we good people, Mom?" I paused, then said, "We're trying to be." It was the most honest answer I could give. A year later, I saw Margaret at a farmer's market. She was alone, browsing vegetables, her face softer but still guarded. I hesitated, then approached. "Margaret," I said. She stiffened but didn't walk away. "I'm sorry it went so far," I said. "I wish we'd found another way." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "So do I," she said finally. We didn't hug or reconcile, but that moment was enough, a crack in the wall between us. Back home, I told David. He smiled, a real smile this time. "Maybe we're all learning," he said. We sat in our garden, the kids chasing fireflies, and I felt a flicker of the old joy. We'd lost something in our fight. Innocence, maybe, or trust. But we'd gained something too. Resilience, the knowledge that we could stand up for what mattered, even if imperfectly. The Hensley's house, now the Parkers, stood as a reminder of our choices. We'd bought it to win, to reclaim our freedom, but it had taught us more about ourselves than we'd expected. Revenge had felt good, but healing felt better. As I watched the sun set over our wildflowers, I knew we'd never be the same, but maybe, just maybe, we were better for it.